Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Race Report, your inside track to motorsport chats.
This week on the pod, we are taking time to chat about the Canadian Grand Prix, all the drama going on in IndyCar, as well as the 24 hours of Le Mans. As many of you may know, or some of you may not know, I was actually at the Canadian Grand Prix. Um, so we're going to dive right in. I'm going to give you guys kind of the what's what on the in-person experience and give you some pointers or maybe, advice on, is this the race for you, or should you check out some other options instead? So got to Montreal on a Monday ahead of race week. Flying into the airport there was super, super easy. Not very difficult to get an Uber out into the city as well. Expect your Uber ride from the airport's probably going to be roughly an hour with traffic. They're not super close by actual downtown Montreal and the airport itself. One of the best things about this city is it's one, extremely walkable, and anything that is not walkable attraction wise, you can very, very easily take public transit. They have a ton of different bus routes and train lines throughout the city, so getting to and from different events, restaurants, museums during the race week, super easy to do. Activities that they had going on for F1 specifically, Williams was running one of their fan zones at this week's Grand Prix. Ferrari had a pop-up event with Peroni where you were able to go see the display car and get a free can of Peroni and try it out for yourself. And then Mercedes also had a really cool event, big store pop-up with the little WhatsApp car. There was like a whole pit wall that you could sit and take photos at, and sim racing as well. I've been to two Grand Prix now, which I'm really proud and excited to be able to say. Austin in October, and this race in Austin, I sat GA with Lauren and Kaylee. That's actually where
Yeah.
we met, but we'll get into that eventually soon. And
Your
then
little dinosaur chairs.
and then in Montreal, I had grandstand seats in grandstand 46, so after the hairpin along the long straight. Um, Personally, reflecting back on it or comparing the two races, would I say Montreal is worth it? I'm not entirely sure. Definitely, if you are going to go, getting grandstand seats is the better route. The general admission seating is really difficult to see the track and see it well. Um, Depending on which grandstand you're in, it is also pretty hard to see the racing. For example, where I was sat, really all we would see was a car zip past, and that was it. Though, if you have a little bit better placement or you spend a little bit more on tickets, you'll probably have a better view of a longer segment of the track and therefore more of the racing. In comparison, at COTA, really, really amazing general admission seating. I think the girls can kind of attest to that as well. We're planning to go back again this year, and there is no doubt in my mind that I would rather sit GA than spend the money on a grandstand ticket every time at that track.
Sort of more on Julia's fact, we sat GA, turn 11, right at the bobby pin, so you could see them coming off of one straight, around the corner, and then up the next. Very positive experience. I've sat grandstand versions in other races, so IndyCar, NASCAR. I really liked the sort of freedom that you have as a GA ticket holder where you can walk to your preferred seating area. So depending on what you want to see, you have that freedom to move around and sort of pick where you want to be at any point in the race. You're not bound to where you are. It was also very nice to be able to bring umbrellas and kind of sit under the shade, whereas if you were in the grandstand, that would not have been okay with the people who sat behind you. And I think it also kind of allowed for a more community sense because you are so close with your neighbor. That's how Julia met us. They were happened to be sitting next to us the first day, and we've latched on ever since.
Yeah, I totally agree about general admission at COTA. So my first race was actually Barcelona of last year, and we were in a grandstand for that race, which I loved because the GA at Barcelona I wouldn't really recommend. It was like people on hillsides and like under trees, like trying to get a view of the track. I think we were kind of like on the last few corners is where our grandstand was. like kind of right before they turn to go on the main back straight, and so I would definitely recommend that grandstand. I don't know the name of it, but and then went to Coda with them, and my dad had gone the previous year, and they were so ill prepared for general admission. They showed up with hotel towels and pillows that they had taken from the hotel to sit on, because they didn't have like any kind of chairs or picnic blankets or whatever. So thankfully I had that knowledge when we came in, and Kaylee and I packed like little folding chairs in our checked luggage and a picnic blanket, so we kind of could claim a whole kind of area of space and like take turns lying down. And so would definitely recommend chairs and a picnic blanket if you're sitting in GA to really kind of mark off your space. But yeah, definitely agree with all that.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, like each race is so unique and so different. It really depends on the race itself. Like Montreal, for example, is a grandstand race. If you're going to go to it, you better be in a grandstand. I think more importantly is to pick your grandstand wisely, if that is the case, and like be prepared. I had done, some pre-packing, some outfit ideas, and I was so relieved that I brought like alternate options. So, I wanted to wear pants most of the days, and the weather in Canada is so crazy. It could be super hot one minute, pouring rain the next. On Saturday, I actually, even though it was pouring rain, ended up at one point with sunburn down the entire fronts of my legs. So even that too, like it's Canada, I did pack sunscreen, and I just didn't think to either A, put it on, or B, bring it with me, and just found out a little bit too late the consequences of that. If you are sitting grandstands and it is bench seating versus bucket seating, be prepared to be sat directly up against the people next to you. The grandstands get packed, but the positive of that is you can roll up for your seat right before whichever segment of the race is starting, and you're guaranteed that seat. At Coda, we had to go multiple hours early to kind of stake that claim on, this is our spot for the day. So just some like tips and tricks to keep that in mind as we, keep on with the pod and all of our other content. Again, plugging that TikTok and our Instagram, check it out. We'll definitely be doing some other like race guides, packing guides, outfit inspo, all that good stuff to kind of help our little besties through the pod get ready for the races.
All right, so diving in to the race weekend for Canada, starting with free practice. I wasn't able to watch as much live as I usually do. I normally am watching like every single session live, but I was at the lake in Alabama that weekend. So everything was delayed, and I was relying on Julia, who was there, for my sources, and asked her, because I'm very invested in my fantasy team, should I keep Charles on my team at times 2 points or switch it to Lando? And she says, the Ferraris are looking really good in practice. You should keep it on Charles. And I fully blame her for tanking my fantasy team this week. I got 76 points. Yeah, I did really great.
To my credit, at the time of me reporting this to you, both Ferraris were in the top 3 during free practice, and everything went wrong after that. I am so sorry, because I remember sitting at quali and being like, oh no, Lauren. Poor Lauren. She's gonna hate me. And maybe it's just
Monday
my Ferrari
quarterbacking.
Delulu.
Yeah.
I just wanted them to do well, and that's why I lied to
Same.
you.
I mean, you didn't lie to me. They were doing good in free practice, but then they weren't doing good after that.
I'm wondering too if it's because the like weather those days was so much warmer. We'll talk about it a little bit later on in the pod, but typically the Ferrari engine does better in warmer weather. So maybe come quali time when it had rained a lot and things had coolen off, that's where the problem started that kind of led through the rest of the weekend. But speaking of quali, what a quali it was, what a result that it was. I remember sitting in the grandstands and just being like, no, like, this is not the lineup that I wanted. So from P1 onward, it was George, Max, Lando, Oscar, Daniel, Fernando, Lewis, Yuki, Lance. So definitely some names that you don't expect to hear kind of in the top 5 to 10 people. And that's all I'll say about that.
Some of you may or may not know, I'm not the biggest George Russell fan.
You're not a Brussels sprout?
I'm not.
Shocker.
So sorry. I'm a big Lewis fan, and we'll get into the Mercedes drama later. But anyways, I mean, good for him. I mean, it was someone else besides Max, and George literally got pole. I think it was 1/1000th of a second that he like etched it out by. So I mean, good for him. Congratulations. But yeah, that was just crazy how close that was. Like the technology now to like even be able to tell that is crazy to me. But
when I looked at the timing board and I saw like, because to me they only show you the first like couple decimal points, and I'm like, okay, well George and Max have like the same time, but like who's really in front? And the fact that they have to take it that far out to like thousandths of seconds, just to make that final like decision. You know, it was, I mean, other things that happened during qualifying, it should be surprising, but it's not a surprise this season. We had Checo P16 after, you know, ahead of the weekend, he was re-signed to Red Bull. And during the weekend, live while we were sitting there watching, Yuki was announced that he is renewed at Visa Cash App, which I was super excited about. One, just because I want to see Yuki in a seat. It could be a Williams or a Haas. I don't care. Preferred Visa Cash App over that, but I think you guys already know my opinions on it. Like, I still think he should have had that Red Bull seat, and after this result, I still stand by that times 10.
I am a little disappointed just because I was hoping Liam Lawson would finally get a permanent seat in F1 in this coming season. Do love Yuki, do support him, want him to do well, but I was very hopeful that maybe there'd be a little bit more movement, and maybe there will come 2026, and that Liam will maybe get that seat, or if it's with Red Bull or if it's with someone else. We'll talk about that maybe a little bit later, but you know, I'm excited to see how the rest of the grid falls for this next year.
I don't think it's impossible. I mean, we still have an open V-carb seat that's not announced.
Has Daniel not resigned?
Not yet.
Never mind then. Liam Lawson, where you at?
Speaking of some people and some seats and what next year looks like, Kaylee, do you want to talk about Pookie Wookie?
Loki Bear, our favorite and only American. We are all Logan Sargent apologists here. He will never do any wrong in our eyes, and we all stand by that. Raw America. Very proud of him. I think this was his highest qualifying of the season, which, you know, as we've seen in these last couple races, he has out-qualified Checo multiple times now. So is he getting more comfortable in his seat? Is it really just that Checo is not having a good time at it? It could be anything. Proud of him, though. I think he raced really well. He did really well in qualifying. So good for him. Good on him. And then RIP, the Ferraris. Both of them out in Q2. 11 and 12. The boys were not having a good time of it. And it's kind of disappointing, especially after the high from Monaco. And, you know, having them race so hard, having Charles win his first race, having, you know, both Ferraris on the podium, to having them both out in Q2, especially when poor Lauren chose her team the way she did.
Such bad choices.
I'm not gonna lie. I think I sent you guys a photo immediately after, like, both of them got knocked out in qualifying, where I'm, like, full, like, gasp. I audibly gasped so loud. The person that I went to the race with was like, ooh. And of course, on this day, I'm sat next to like other Ferrari fans, and you can just hear the entire crowd be like, like the gasps and the like no like echoed across the entire grandstand, and I was like, no, that can't happen.
I saw someone posted that Sabrina Carpenter wrote "Please, please, please" for Ferrari fans, and I have never resonated with something so truly to my soul in that moment when they both got knocked out of Q2.
I know, I was ready to put my clown makeup back on. Qualifying, I think one of the most diverse qualifyings that we've had of the season so far. Not personally my favorite, like, quali or race, but that's because I'm an opinionated person who ride or dies Ferrari, McLaren, and so if it's not for them, I don't want it. But kind of leading into race day, I got to check off quite a few bingo boxes for Canada, one of which being a 5+ DNF race, um, back on our Ferrari pain train. So both Ferraris DNF'd. We knew early on Charles had some sort of engine issues that he was trying to manage. And then after a bad pit stop where they basically had to kind of reset the engine to see if that would fix the problem, they decided to swap him onto slick tires because they felt that the track had dried out enough to then send him out and immediately pit him back again for, I think it was intermediates, because it was a terrible, terrible strategy choice. And then later on, again, that issue kind of persisting, and then just finally telling him, like, retire the car. We're just going to take the L on this week and, hopefully come back stronger for Barcelona. Carlos also DNF'd after, I think he might have had, I want to say either he slid or he had a little bit of a lockup, which caused him to collide and spin into Albon. And then after that, poof, done. No Ferraris finishing the race this week. Bad quali, bad race. One to forget if you are a Tifosi.
Great free practice, though, so.
Yes, because that's the most important part of the weekend is the free practice.
So speaking of double DNFs, we also had that with Williams. Poor Logan really tried his best, but he lost grip, and he sadly does what he does best, hit the wall.
Don't say such heinous things about my Logie
still
bear.
Love him, but it's true. And then Albon, this was hard because I love Sainz, but he hit Albon and caused him to DNF, and so that was a sad day as well. But Albon did, on a positive note, have one of the best overtakes I've seen in a long time on Daniel and Esteban. Literally, he didn't know if he just sent it and hoped that he wasn't going to crash, basically. Around Daniel, fit into this gap. Perfect. If you watch look and see if you can find online the helicopter view, because he, pieces in like a puzzle through and then takes the corner tight. And, good for Ocon for, being aware, because that could have been, right over. But, literally, pieced in and out perfectly. Very impressive overtake of the year, in my opinion.
I agree with that. Good for Ocon being aware for once is hilarious.
Good for Ocon being aware. Great overtake for Albon. Good job just sending it. Oh, and at the beginning of the race with Haas, putting both their cars on wet tires, just I wasn't fully paying attention at the beginning of the race, and all of a sudden I looked at the timing sheets and K-Mag's way up there, and I was like, what in the world happened? And then realized that they were both on wet tires, and I was like, can we just end the race now with both Haas's moving through the pack, absolutely dominating? But then when they had to pit for intermediates, they kind of fell back down to where they started and just missed out on points. But good for K-Mag. He was up to P4.
We love the Haas's when they do well, and we support them when they don't.
Even if it's only for one lap.
Love my Haas boys.
I have grown up cheering for underdog teams, so I can't even be surprised anymore. I don't have any joy or real excitement when they're doing well for any team, not just, K-Mag and Haas, just because I know it won't last. I'm a time and time again underdog. I know they're going back down. They'll come back up again, but they're gonna go right back down at the end.
One other DNF we didn't cover. Kaylee, I'll let you take this away before I mean again.
It's okay. Well, so we all know who it was. Raise your hand if you know who it was. Checo. Surprised, are we? No. I'm sure there are lots of Checo fans who are very disappointed in how it shook out in the end. And I'm going to leave it there.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave it there.
I think that says most of it. Yeah.
It covers it fully.
It covers
I think.
it. That's it. You know?
I don't know.
We came out classy in the end. We're good.
What is it? The next stat we're gonna get is instead of it being like Logan out qualifies Checo, it'll be like Logan has less DNFs.
Logan has
that
more
would be
points than
crazy.
Checo.
That would be wild.
I would love to see that. We've put a lot of stake in you, Logan. I know you're not listening to this podcast, but you need to live up to the promises we've made for you.
Okay, I don't think he can take any more stress. I already worry about him too much. I'm like, he finishes a race, and if I were him, I would go in a room and cry. I wouldn't talk to anyone. I would just cry. Because...
Oh, Logie.
Imagine being loved that much. Oh, I hope he has one.
He needs one.
Just for the sheer torment he goes through after every race. Especially the ones that he doesn't finish. Peace and love, Logan. Peace and love. I mean nothing but love for you. So with the whole Daniel thing, he kind of got called out in the media publicly by Villeneuve. Is that how you say it, Villeneuve?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
You got it.
Let me read this quote for you. He said, "Why is he still in F1? Why? We're hearing the same thing now for the last 4 or 5 years. We have to make a car better for him. Poor him. Sorry, it's been 5 years of that. No, you're an F1. Maybe you make that effort for Lewis Hamilton, who's won multiple championships. You don't make that effort for a driver who can't cut it. If you can't cut it, go home. There's someone else to take your place. That's how it's always been in racing. It's the pinnacle of the sport. There's no reason to keep going and to keep finding excuses." And I definitely see where he's coming from. I mean, speaking as a journalist and, former champion, he has some truth behind his words. I mean, granted, no one likes hearing anything like that about themselves, especially publicly. But, I mean, to his credit, it seems to have given the push he needed to perform better, lit a fire under him, so to speak, because he finished P8 and he qualified P5. And even Villeneuve came back and said, I mean, I guess he kind of took what I said to heart, to paraphrase, because you can see that he definitely benefited this race. He definitely, put in the extra gusto and seemed to have come out a lot better than where he has been placing in these last couple races in this last couple season. And then poor Yuki, he would have done better. It would have been in the points, but you know how things stack up sometimes.
Yeah, that was tough to see, like, especially too after he got his contract renewal announced and then was on track for a really good race, just for it to kind of be gone so quickly. Especially too, that was shortly after VCarb told Yuki and Daniel you guys are allowed to fight. If you want to fight, you can fight. Which I think, one, makes for better racing, and two, for both of them as drivers, is healthy. I think it's different than Alpine, where for no reason are they going to be Esteban, Pierre, go at it, because they know what will happen.
Yeah.
Right. Luckily, when I played it back, especially too, I was really relieved to see that what did happen with Yuki kind of miffing it was not related to them fighting. It was totally outside of that. It was driver error. It was a mistake. If it had been because they were fighting each other, I would have been so much more upset. So, to get into our little engineering segment of the pod, this is a thing that I found super interesting, and I think I'm going to pay a lot more attention to kind of moving forward through the season. if you look at the like whole grid at the end of the week, I think it's pretty easy to say that your top teams collectively, like this is taking like Max in a Red Bull out of the situation, or even like the V carbs, your overall consistent best performing teams were Mercedes, McLaren, Aston Martin. Why is that? Right? I mean, we know McLaren's been doing really well. Mercedes has been a lot more middle of the pack. Aston Martin's kind of slipped off in comparison to last season. And I think the other question begs, like, why was Ferrari so bad? This all has to do a lot with the actual physical build of the car. So the engine being used, and then additionally, the way that the car is built around the engine to help with A, aerodynamics, B, engine cooling, and a few other things. So if you notice, reoccurring theme between all three of these teams, they all use Mercedes engines. This was a wet race. The temperatures were much, much colder than a race like, say, Monaco or Australia or Miami, where you have hotter weather. So one thing that you can kind of notice race to race, and I think this is something to keep an eye out through the season, is that Mercedes engines typically perform better in the cool or cooler weather. So they were more suited towards the Montreal climate and the wet. And the Ferrari engines, in comparison, are much more suited to warmer weather. On top of that, and kind of stratifying further of the three teams with the Mercedes engines, why is it that McLaren has outperformed Mercedes, the actual manufacturer that they buy from this year? McLaren has their car set up in a better way to properly cool the tires and the engine during the race, which is why if you see too, they always talk about like Lando's tire management and like how long they're able to do stints on tires that normally should degrade a lot faster. It's because of the way that they've built the actual body structure of the car to assist with these things. So that's kind of your little tidbit engineering study up. It's something that I'm planning to like learn a little bit more about. I've never considered myself like a techie engineering girl, but this is one of the elements of the sport that I find so crazy, that those little tiny details make such a difference race to race.
I think it's very interesting, sort of more to your point, how critical those interlocking pieces of being able to translate well from not only just using your engine to the best of its ability, and I mean, seeing how even the own engine provider might not be using it to its max capacity, but seeing, okay, well, we have to take into account for engine, we have to take into account for tires, we have to take into account for everything in the car. I think it can be really easy to forget, especially like just speaking from my own experience. The race is very centered around the drivers and the moves that the drivers are making, so you're not always getting sort of that behind the scenes aspect and all of the very technical, very engineering side of the car and the inner working pieces. It's almost like a giant clock cog. Like, it's just everything has to lock well together for it to perform well. And I think that's definitely a very cool behind the scene that I'm excited to hear more about from you, Julia.
Okay, so obviously I was a little bit disappointed with how the race actually shook out, being a big Ferrari fan and a Williams fan, but very excited about the actual racing aspect of it. After the race was done, my brother texted in our like group chat in all caps, "Real racing is back," which I agree with. It was so exciting to actually have 3 race leaders and not truly know who was going to win most of the race. So Max finally having a bit of a challenge, and another person not just winning because Max has an issue or like something's off with the Red Bull car, or I mean, his car was completely fine the whole race. So that was very exciting, and very excited, looking forward to the rest of the season. But then going on to the podium and George coming third, I think Lewis should have come third. But I'm not gonna be an annoying LH44 Army fan and just talk about that the whole time. But George like didn't seem very grateful or excited for his P3. He kind of looked a bit sulky because he didn't win, even though he's on pole, but it was pretty much his own fault. And then after the race, Lewis like tweeted out like what a great result for the team, like congrats to George, all this stuff, and George's post was like, could have done better, shouldn't have done this, shouldn't have done that, whatever, like didn't really talk about Lewis at all, like great result for the team, like they both scored great points. So that was a bit, lots of Lewis fans went crazy on Twitter, just like bashing Mercedes, especially after Mercedes posted like a photo of the trophy that George got with first trophy of the year, and then everyone kicking back like, no, because Lewis came second in the sprint in China, and that was the first trophy of the year. And so that was kind of a big mess and kind of started the whole Twitter attack, you could say.
And I think it's definitely interesting how the admins were responding to people in the comments. And I get it. I mean, admins are usually made up of younger people who are either just entering the workforce or who are new to that specific genre of the workforce. So it's all learning. But I definitely think there still needs to be some kind of professional aspect about when you're responding to fans. Even if you do not agree with how they're responding, you still carry the burden of leading by example, especially when you represent such a large team, both on and off the track. Like, you are always carrying your representation, especially how you respond to fans. So I'm glad they later apologized, but really there should never have been a need for an apology. And then it was also kind of ironic that Twitter later flagged the post as not correct. So, all's well that ends well, I guess. But it's definitely interesting to see how big of social media plays into an aspect, especially with fan engagement, now that it's sort of very accessible versus when in earlier years, even 5 years ago, it wasn't such a big deal. So it's just kind of disappointing to see a team of such magnitude and who a lot of people have held in such high regard respond in that way.
To finish off our kind of F1 segment of the podcast, we're going to talk a little bit about some recent kind of contract announcements or rumors that have come out. As we had mentioned earlier, Checo's contract was renewed and announced a little bit ahead of the actual Canadian Grand Prix race weekend. And as we've kind of said a few times, considering his current performance, I think a lot of people are really wondering like where is the logic in that? And from some of the things that I've seen or what I've kind of understood is allegedly not confirmed. We all know Checo has really great sponsorship. He brings in really good sponsors to the team and therefore a lot of money. So there is word on the street that part of his sponsorship money likely helps to fund Max's contract. We know right now Max has probably the biggest contract in F1. I think he's making, last I checked, he was making like $55 million a year, which is crazy. But a little bit of further breakdown on what Checo's 2-year contract actually is. It's not a full 2-year. It's actually a 1+1. If you're new to F1 or you don't necessarily understand how contracts kind of work, a 1+1 means he's guaranteed a 1-year contract, obviously potentially with different contingencies in that, but he has that seat for the next year at least. And then the +1 after that is an option. Typically, they add a lot of contingencies to that. So the additional year may not be an option if he doesn't meet performance metrics given to him by Red Bull. So after year 1, he probably has to perform a certain way to get that second year confirmed, or he'll be gone. The other thing may be that there really aren't conditions attached. It's more that come year 2 of the contract, him and Red Bull will both decide, like, do we stick it out or do we part ways and you go elsewhere? So I'm interested to see if this is the kind of thing where if he continues to perform poorly this year and then next year comes around and he's also not performing, is Red Bull going to do their classic driver swap? I also just think it's crazy that Checo's been shown so much leniency, whereas in the past, like, Pierre had that Red Bull seat and got it taken away, given to Alex Albon. Alex Albon had that seat, didn't perform to what they wanted, they gave it to Checo. Like, it's funny to me how those are two drivers who had very little time to perform well in the seat and got it pulled away. And this is a driver who's had the seat for a long time, isn't keeping up his end of the bargain, and we're just kind of like skating past it a little bit.
Money talks, and that's all I have to say about that. So now we're going to jump over into IndyCar, and we did have the Road America IndyCar race, I guess 2 weekends ago at this point. I didn't watch it because I was at the lake, and F1 was prioritized, so I apologize for that. But there has been lots of drama going on, way too much drama going on in the IndyCar sphere right now. I feel like every time I open my phone, there's like an IndyCar official post with like breaking news. Someone else is driving for McLaren that wasn't at the beginning of the season. So
at this point, it should be surviving McLaren, a tale of those who were not, and not breaking news, who's driving for McLaren. I need, like, how they do, like, post-quitting interviews. I need a post-race seat McLaren interview. Done on camera,
seat, yeah.
Survivor style, like where they're just sitting there talking to the camera. Yeah, guys, it was a really tough one race. You know, I really tried my best out there. Disappointed with how I was voted off the island or race seat, but you know, we'll come back stronger than ever.
Yeah, so for those who don't know or just are confused by the amount of driver changes that the number 6 car at Arrow McLaren has had, starting off the season, we had David Malukas in the number 6 car, but then he broke his wrist in a biking accident. So for the first 4 races, he was still signed with the team, but he wasn't racing. So we had Théo Pourchaire in the car racing for him. Then he got booted off the team, Malukas, because his wrist still wasn't better. And I think it was like a clause in his contract, if he missed 4 races, he was like viable to be able to be let go. So he was let go. And then we had, for the Indy 500, Callum Ilott ran in the car because he had done it before and was, instead of putting a rookie in that car, they'd rather have someone that had done it before. Then they had Théo Pourchaire back in the car, and he was doing a really good job, like very impressive, all this stuff. And then after Le Mans, I mean, what was this, 2 days ago we got the news that now Nolan Siegel is having that seat and Théo Pourchaire is not going to be in the seat anymore, after it had just been announced that Théo Pourchaire was going to be in the car the remainder of the season and onwards. And then they're like, oh, never mind, not anymore, it's now Nolan Siegel. So I feel really bad for Théo, because he was literally just tweeting like, oh, I'm so excited to race this weekend. I mean, he must have found out when we all did. Like, there's no ways. Because that tweet and the timing of, like, the Arrow McLaren dropping the news, I was like, oh, sorry, Théo.
R.I.P. Tony Porkchop. I do hope that they at least gave him the courtesy of the call before the news dropped to the media, and that he didn't have to find out, like, when we all found out.
I don't know.
Like, some kind of forewarning.
Because, like, that tweet was posted, like, 20 hours beforehand. The thing that I don't get, and Lauren, I don't know if you understand or have more information on it, how is it that they're able to just, like, plop drivers all around into different teams and different seats? Like, I know Nolan Siegel raced this season under a different team, didn't he?
Yes, so some of the teams, for some of their seats, don't have full-time drivers. So Ed Carpenter Racing is one of them. I can't remember all of the teams that have them, but like, you don't have to have full-time drivers in each of your spots. So they'll have like, Nolan Siegel is signed for like these 3 races, and like this guy is signed for these 3 races, and this guy is signed for these 3 races, and so they switch out. I don't really know the point in doing that. Like, yeah, it gives people like a chance to drive in an IndyCar, but it's like, what's the point in like grow? If you want to be able to grow that person and have that person be in your team and like perform for you, so I don't get. I'll have to do more research into why they do that, but that is the case of like every time you open IndyCar, it's like breaking news, blah 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 is going to be driving the blah 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 this week, and it switches out. It's because some of those teams don't have like permanent drivers in all their seats. So the other major drama that's going on in IndyCar is with Agustin Canapino and the Juncos Hollinger Racing team. So kind of circling back a little bit to Arrow McLaren, during the Detroit Grand Prix, Teo Porcher hit into Agustin Canapino, and it was like definitely a racing incident. It was Teo's fault, but it didn't take either of them out of the race. Like, it wasn't, there were so many wrecks in that Grand Prix, like it wasn't on anyone's radar. Teo got a penalty for it. He served his penalty, blah blah blah, we move on. Then all after the race, Teo gets like flooded with all of these like hate comments and threats from Canapino fans, to the point that he puts out a statement saying like, you know, please stop, like, I didn't mean to do it, like, it was a racing incident, I served my penalty, like, basically why am I like being hated on? And that didn't like help, it got worse. And Agustin Canapino was allegedly liking tweets about the incident, kind of making fun of Teo and like what, like about the threats and everything, and was like denying that he was getting death threats and all this. And then Juncos Hollinger and Arrow McLaren put out like a joint post saying like, we will not stand for online abuse, yada yada yada. And then like it just continued, and Agustin Canapino, I can't speak, continued to just kind of like be liking these tweets like about it. And sadly, this is not the first time this has happened. This is the third time he's done this. So last year he was teammates on Juncos Hollinger with Callum Ilott, and there were two different instances where they kind of got into a little bit of scuffles, and it wasn't anyone's like real fault. They were all racing incidents where Canapino fans got mad at Ilott and like hounded him on Twitter to the point where like he had to turn off his comments or was like had to put out statements like, please, I didn't do anything. And Canapino never put out an apology. Juncos Hollinger really backed Canapino, never really stood up for Ilott. It ended up with Ilott like not being re-signed to the team the following year, and he doesn't have a seat in IndyCar this year. And yeah, Canapino just continuing to like tweets about this and like egg on fans' poor behavior. And so when it happened this time at the Detroit Grand Prix, and after all that kind of happened, then Arrow McLaren and Juncos Hollinger had not a technical partnership, like a sponsorship partnership, where Arrow McLaren has so many sponsors, they gave some their smaller ones for Juncos Hollinger to kind of have, basically. So it was more of a win situation for Juncos Hollinger, but it was a win-win situation for both of them. And so kind of after Juncos Hollinger wasn't like telling Canapino to stop this behavior or whatever, they pulled out their partnership with Juncos Hollinger, like, we don't want to have anything to do with you. And they were standing up for their driver, which I appreciate, but then they go and drop him like 2 weeks later. So I don't really get that. It's like, oh, that was great, like, you stood up for Teo, like, you're gonna re-sign him, awesome. And then it's like, never mind, we don't want you anymore. Goodbye. So I mean, I feel like that really sums up Arrow McLaren and how it's run, and just McLaren in general and how it's run. But you know,
yeah,
gotta love it.
I always struggle with, and like we talked about this so much last year at Austin, like sometimes it's actually just so shocking to see such bad sportsmanship. And like, I know like we're not huge Max fans or anything like that, but like in the example of Austin, we're standing in front of the podium, and you know, Red Bull fans for his teammate are booing Max for winning. And this just like feels like a similar thing where like, I don't know, if I was a driver and I saw like conduct like that, I would put out a statement and be like, this isn't cool. Even in the sense of like, Esteban Ocon got a lot of hate after Monaco, and even he put out a statement and was like, this like isn't acceptable, like telling me that I should die or whatever like isn't okay. And I just can't get over like, you don't have to like a person at the end of the day, but like you can also just choose to like keep your mouth shut and like in a threatening way. Like I don't always say nice things about all of the drivers because I'm not a big fan of them, but I'm not ever saying like really negative, ill wishing stuff to them, you know?
And I think we need to remember that these are real people. They have real lives. They were kids, sons, daughters. You know, they are people too at heart. Yes, they mess up. Yes, we hold them on such a high pedestal that I think it can kind of be easy to let that line blur between reality and, you know, sort of idol worship. But these people read this stuff. I think we forget that. Like a lot of, you know, F1 probably have people who scan their social media, but especially in IndyCar, many of the IndyCar drivers run their own social media accounts. They are reading all of these comments. They are reading all this hate directed to them. And if you flip it around from sort of the perspective, if I was receiving that, that would be so detrimental to my own mental health. And even just, I wouldn't want to go out in the world after receiving death threats. And sort of to the point with Junko Hollinger, I think it's a little too little too late. I mean, you have a repeat offender. There we go. I think I said that last time too. Repeat offender who, for whatever reason, has shown that he has a tendency to sort of egg on in certain capacities this drama behind incidences that were for their part ruled out as racing incidences and, you know, not of malicious intent but sort of just trials of racing. And I think it's disappointing to see fellow drivers not kind of stand up for other people, regardless sort of how you were saying. You don't have to like the person, but there needs to be some level of respect for your fellow driver in this sport. I mean, people say it's the pinnacle of racing, but yet we can't have respect for our fellow driver, regardless of whether or not you like how they perform. I think it's very, just kind of wants to give a side eye to say, oh, so we're going to act like that, but then we're going to say this thing.
So, as girlies in motorsport, we love to support other women in motorsport. One of those amazing women just so happens to be Jamie Chadwick. Jamie, if you ever see this, ever, we would love to get you on the pod. Please and thank you. If you are new to IndyCar and you don't know what IndyNXT is, it's kind of along the lines of like a feeder series where people get kind of a good chance to get into a similar car and race and, you know, maybe be brought up into IndyCar later on in their career. Jamie Chadwick is, I think, one of like maybe 2 or 3 women in the series currently. And at the Road of America's race, she came in pole position after qualifying and then won the actual race. So that's big kudos to her. She is the first woman in IndyNXT since 2010 to win a race. Specifically, first woman in IndyNXT since 2010 to win. She's only the 3rd ever female winner in the series, which really kind of goes to show like how limited women's access to motorsport has been and how much there is a need to kind of continue pushing that like women do have a place in this sport, and when they are in it, they can succeed and they can win and they can perform well. Additionally, she is the first ever woman to win a IndyNXT race on a street course. The other 2 women who won previously, that was on an oval.
So, I mean, she did an amazing job. She led every single lap of the race, and she won by just under a second, I think 0.8 of a second. And I mean, that was just so awesome. Like, she's such an amazing driver and just like person, and what she's done for women's motorsport. And yeah, she's one of 2 drivers, female drivers in IndyNXT. Lindsay Brewer, I think is her name, drives for the Juncos Hollinger IndyNXT team. So there's 2 of them this year. So that's been really exciting to watch. We got to watch the IndyNXT race when Kaylee and I were in Alabama at Barber, so that was cool to actually get to watch them race in real life. But yeah, that was really awesome and a great day for all the women in motorsport.
And I think Foster said it best, who is her teammate who came in second. They said she's done an amazing job. She was the woman to beat this weekend, really, really fast, more than happy for the team. 1-2, you can't ask for anything more. And a little background on Jamie, she has also previously won 3 W Series championships in Europe. So, I love to see her now sort of transitioning to this side, and I'm excited to see where she will go. Hopefully, we'll see her in IndyCar one day or F1. It's really exciting, sort of to what Julia was saying, to see women succeeding in a sport that has been so male dominated for so long. It gives us something to work towards, it gives us something to take pride in, to give something little girls who are, finally seeing something that they are maybe now able to achieve. So go, Jamie. Proud of you. Woo!
Absolutely. I kind of meant to mention it or forgot to mention it. When we're looking at how women are being brought into motorsport, I think Jamie is an example, a league above in a way. So W Series was the all-female racing series that was hosted or run before F1 Academy kind of took over that space. And, I'm a huge F1 Academy supporter. I think it's needed, and it needs to be recognized. And I'm really glad that they're broadcasting it this year too. However, I think it's also important that we see a space where women are able to compete alongside male drivers and not just against other women, because I think in those all-female series, too many people just discredit them because they're like, well, yeah, they're beating each other because they're just girls, rather than a moment where we get to see, a woman beating a man. And not to say that, like, oh, like, men, blah, like, it's not about that. It's about proving that, everyone likes to say boys are better at sports than girls, and that's just not the case. So, like, that was a really exciting thing. I think we've had similar results in, I believe, F3, where we've had some of the female drivers in that perform really well against male counterparts, and I really just hope in future we see a lot more integration between, male and female drivers getting to compete in the same series and not in a, more segregated capacity.
Okay, so this past weekend we didn't have any F1 or IndyCar races, but we did have the 24-hour of Le Mans. Ferrari won again, back-to-back winners from last year to this year. They came first and third. So the car that they won, it's 50 and 51, and I don't remember who won this year and who won last year.
50.
50 won this year?
Yeah.
Okay, so 51 this year. So 51 came third this year, and 51 was the car that won last year. So very exciting for Tifosi. I was very excited. Go Ferrari. I love listening to the Italian national anthem and everyone singing along. It's the highlight of the race, honestly, in my opinion. But
well, even the broadcasters love the Italian national anthem so much that they were singing it delusional at God knows what hour of the evening.
Yeah.
I know you and I talked about this, Lauren, about how back-to-back winners and the fact that last year was their first year back competing in Le Mans after not racing in it since 1973. And I think that is a crazy thing that people aren't, like, understanding enough, to come back into something that you've not dominated in for a long time and have 2 back-to-back wins. Like, I don't know, Le Mans is totally separate from F1, but it's really giving me that feeling of, like, the Ferrari revitalization and, like, are we in a new era? While they were not competing, question is who was the prime winning seat most of the time. That would be Toyota, and they actually placed second this year, so they're still up there and they're still, like, an extremely competitive team. But Tifosi moment. Well, we can keep it going. I'm okay with that. Let's start with Le Mans and let's take the F1 championship next, and then maybe we'll get like a Ferrari IndyCar, who knows.
Let's talk about the best part of Le Mans, all the memes that we got from
Yes.
the crew sleeping. Those are the true winners. Those are the true winners right there.
Which, if you follow us on Instagram, you would have seen it on the stories.
And you can go back and watch the highlight reel and giggle along with us, guys.
Plug.
Plug.
Yeah, I mean, there was a 4-hour-long safety car during the prime. I mean, what's nice about it being a 24-hour race is that there's prime watching time for, like, the whole world. Because, like, sometimes for F1, it's, like, ridiculous times for Americans or, you know, Europe or whatever. But at least for, like, a 24-hour race, it's a good time for everyone. But I felt like the prime watching time for Americans was when the 4-hour safety car was, because it was, like, nighttime for us on the East Coast. So that was just, Kaylee and I were like, oh, let's turn on Le Mans and, like, watch it while we kind of had another show in the background. And it was, like, literally just the safety car. So that's when we made the memes on our Instagram, because they were pretty much just showing the engineers and stuff in the garages, like, trying to find comfy positions to sleep. They had, like, full-on beach chairs or, like, lawn chairs that they were sleeping on. The one guy had we didn't get a picture of this one, but he had a toilet paper roll, not like a paper towel roll that he was using as a pillow. Iconic. So another team that I was kind of excited to watch or follow during the Mans was Alpine, solely for the fact of that Mick Schumacher was driving one of the cars. And he was doing such a good job. When he was in the car, he was, like, flying, making up, like, spots. Amazing. But then both of them ended up DNFing because of engine issues. And are we really surprised? No. But...
And I think it's interesting that Renault is now putting out statements that they are no longer considering coming back as an engine supplier for F1. So, you know, more to the point of what is this going to mean with Alpine? We have a lot, you know, coming out in these last couple of weeks with Ocon not re-signing. Their engine provider seems to be backing out. So I'm interested to see if this will sort of be the downfall of Alpine or a unexpected fresh start, clean slate situation where they can really build up from the ground and sort of maybe kind of fight their way back. But we'll see.
So the last kind of thing of Le Mans, to be honest, no offense, I didn't really pay attention to the GT3 category at all, because I didn't really have anyone in. I mean, the Iron Dames had the all-women racing team in GT3. That is awesome. Was cheering for them. They sadly didn't podium, but besides that, I had really no skin in the game of that category. But I did for LMP2, and I love Clement Novalak, and he came second in his team, and so that was very exciting. He did a great job. He's had some previous pretty bad luck this season. Daytona, he broke his rib, so couldn't race. And then there was I don't remember where it was, but he had another race where his teammate crashed the car, and they were, like, on course to podium, and so that was kind of a letdown. So, I mean, it was his first time ever doing Le Mans, and to get second place is a very big deal. And then the winners of the LMP2, more on Raw America, 2 American rookies and some other British guy, I think his name was Oliver something, were the winning team. And Nolan Siegel, who is now the new driver for the number 6 Arrow McLaren car.
Hopefully the final one for the season.
Yeah, who knows? There may be 3 more. So that is really exciting for him. I'm sad for Teo, but I mean, it's a great opportunity for him. I hope he actually gets to keep the seat, because we know that's not, like, an actual permanent thing with Arrow McLaren. But yeah, that was really exciting to have 2 rookies and them be American winning that category. That was really cool to see. So good job, guys.
Thanks for joining us again this week, and we can't wait to talk more. Bye, guys.